Afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. Again, if you are joining us in the webinar, feel free to put your name in the chat. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice to elected officials all across the state and at every level. So be sure to check out all of our social media channels, like, subscribe, and share. We also have a legal team that is overloaded right now with complaints because it seems as though for some reason the Christian nationalists are emboldened and are really challenging everything in the court. So if you're interested in helping our legal team to be able to deal with the numerous complaints that are submitted to us, please reach out to info@secularaz.org. Let's see, I want to have a few announcements here. I'm actually going to be at Rim Country Pride on Sunday. Somebody reached out because of our Substack, and now I will be there. It is in Pine, and I'm sure Lindsay's probably putting up the links. And then next Monday, we partnered with a couple of other organizations to host a screening of wait, not Monday. I'm sorry. I believe it's Friday. So next Friday, we've partnered with some other organizations to host a screening of a film called Bad Faith with guest Nancy McLean. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure Lindsay's also putting those into the chat as well. Let's see. I'd like to announce also that our Paradise Valley school district candidate forum has been canceled. Unfortunately, there seems to be a bit of a chilling effect in the world of school boards. So we'll revisit that if it comes up. Next week, we are going to be speaking with Kate West. Kate West is a writer and editor based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Oh, here you go, Ian. Here's the rage. She is author of Rift, a memoir of breaking away with Christian patriarchy. I don't know about y'all, but whenever I talk about Christian patriarchy, I get ragey. But for today, Isabella Russian is the policy coordinator at the American Humanist Association. Prior to moving to DC, she worked at the Arizona House of Representatives as nonpartisan research staff, interned with the ACLU of Arizona, and attended Arizona State University. The state is very dear to her, and she's happy to be back in the company of Arizonans. Well, certainly in the company of these Arizonans, because I don't know if I would make that blanket statement if I was at the state legislature, but I'm glad that you're back, Isabella, and I'm just going to go ahead and hand it right off to you. Oh, make sure you're unmuted though, please.
Wow. Yep. Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Secular AZ, and happy World Humanist Day. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So today's presentation is going to be aimed to be all about why it's so important for the secular community, and really everyone for that matter, to register and vote and engage with their elected officials and governments. This presentation is really just meant to be informative and educational, and I hope it perhaps sheds some light on issues that should be of interest to you. It helps you formulate really a better picture of what being a concerned and active citizen really means and what it is. So as mentioned before, my name is Isabella Russian, and I'm so happy to be with and connect with you all here today. I work with the American Humanist Association, or AHA, as their policy manager here in DC. While I did grow up in Illinois, I am an ASU graduate, and I began my professional career at the Arizona House of Representatives, first as a page during the 2019 session, and then as an assistant legislative research analyst for the 2020 and 2021 sessions. For a little while there, I was also interning with the ACLU of Arizona, and I also interned with a member of Congress from Arizona here in Washington. So if it's not very clear, Arizona is very near and dear to my heart. Like, I literally miss it so much. Maybe not now that it's June and that a bunch of draconian laws have been implemented, but regardless, I am so happy to be back in the company of Arizonans. I did want to share this one story because I feel like everybody here could relate. But when I was but a page at the Arizona Capitol, I really didn't know what humanism was. I didn't exactly understand that freedom of religion or belief advocacy mattered for secular people. Like, I remember seeing Tori Roberg come and advocate for some of the hot button issues and thinking that that was like interesting. But I'll never forget the day that I personally watched Rep. Athena Solomon get mocked for giving a humanist invocation on the House floor. I kind of think that that's like my villain origin story. I observed the perspective of like, if you don't abide by certain religious principles, then you must inherently be attacking those religious principles, right? I think it was one of the first times that I understood, without really having the knowledge or vocabulary to describe what I was seeing, that Christian nationalism was deep-seated in our legislative institution here in Arizona. And that if you were not beholden to the mainstream faith, or any faith for that matter, of the institution, you would be ridiculed and bullied and robbed of the respect that every one of us deserves as they pertain to our rights that are enumerated in the establishment and free exercise clauses of the Constitution. So that's my story. Anyway, at the AHA, we basically strive to bring about a progressive society where being good without a God is an accepted and respected way to live life. We are accomplishing this through our defense of civil liberties and secular governance, by our outreach to the growing number of people without traditional faith, and through a continued refinement and advancement of the humanist worldview. Surely, many of you, I'm sure, are aware, this is obviously like a very knowledgeable crowd, but for those who may not be as familiar, humanism is basically a progressive, non-theistic worldview with ethical values informed by scientific knowledge and driven by a desire to meet the needs of people in the here and now. So at the foundation of those values is an affirmation of the dignity of every human being. So during the time we have together, we're going to talk about what exactly is at stake at both the national level and here in Arizona. We'll briefly cover the process of registering to vote in Arizona, and we're going to talk about how to engage with your local government. And just so we can get through the content in a timely manner, we're going to be holding the questions until the end. But I will try my absolute best to answer your questions. If I do not know the answer, I'm definitely happy to connect with you offline. But by the end of the presentation, I want you to know why voting matters, why it's important, and what is at stake here. And the last thing before we get started is I just wanted to take a moment to recognize and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm sure that you've got a lot of things on your plate right now. It's a summer Friday, but you're still here with us today, excited to learn about what's facing the secular community. So the issues that you care about and the people that they affect, thank you for taking time to educate yourself. So I'm definitely very grateful to have you. Next slide, please. Sorry, just making sure that the presentation is going to go.
Do you need to be at the next one that says what's at stake?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, there we go.
So,
and I just want to mention, unfortunately, there's like a problem with the Mac and going full screen on Zoom. So I'm sorry, folks, if it's smaller, unfortunately, that's just how it is. So go ahead, Isabella.
No problem at all. Like this like does the job and it looks good. So, so what is at stake? So why should we even care about voting? Let's talk about why being registered to vote and voting is important in the first place, and why so many nonprofit resources are funneled into GOTV or get out the vote efforts. So for the purposes of this conversation, a lot of my rhetoric is going to be focused on addressing like the legislative side of things. So let's get into a little bit about national legislation. So the act of urging people to vote is not a shallow attempt at encouraging people to participate in democracy for the very sake of it. No, voting is critical to the advancement of civil liberties and human rights. There's a lot facing us today at all levels of government. Nationally, as I'm sure you know, Congress is typically in a gridlock when it comes to standalone bills. However, harmful things are still sneakily making their way into legislative language. Let's also not forget that Congress has other powers beyond just voting, such as like the power to launch investigations, affirm appointees, for examples. You know, the US, if you consider it too, the US of House of Representatives even elected and platformed Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House, of whom was actually the subject of a recent congressional white paper deep dive into his ties with Christian nationalism. So In the 118th Congress, we've seen legislation introduced that includes bills that address judicial ethics reform and expanding the court, bills that attempt to counteract abortion bans and contraception restrictions, ones aimed at combating religious privilege, bills that seek to curb gun violence, and those that protect the LGBTQIA plus community. All great stuff, but none of it ever makes it to any semblance of a finish line. So what Congress has done is advocate for and advance legislation antithetical to people's benefit, such as ones severely restricting abortion access, medical treatment for transgender troops, and efforts to combat climate change. And that was literally all just last week. So, I mean, there's so much more, unfortunately. We can go on forever, but, you know, we at the AHA, we do make efforts to combat this. So we do work a lot with Congressman Jared Huffman of California, who, by the way, is the only out humanist in Congress, and Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland's, basically their Congressional Free Thought Caucus, to combat a lot of this harmful legislation. And then, you know, we also help them put on events and issue white papers that bring to light the dangers of white Christian nationalism prevalence and basically like help further the importance of religious plurality. So transitioning, I do want to point out some things about state legislatures, because too oftentimes does Congress really get all the glory and attention when the state level is where you should be really paying your concern. It is so important to know what is going on in your state and local levels of government. So much of the law that affects your daily life is directly debated and voted on by state legislatures. For example, who has the power to curtail sexual reproductive health and rights? The states. What has the power to ensure that elections are ran free and fair? The states. And so on and so on. State and local level governments are very powerful, and many issues are decided by them. But the unfortunate thing really is that many aren't even aware of their existence, in particular state level legislatures. So the answer to what is at stake at the state level is a lot. State legislatures have been mercilessly passing legislation, ripping away essential healthcare, blatantly crossing the line between separation of church and state, attacking the LGBTQIA plus community, banning books. I think that just the other day, Louisiana became the very first state to successfully pass a bill requiring every public school classroom to display the 10 Commandments. That's for real. Arizona actually had one as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this year. But according to the Guttmacher Institute, 14 states currently have total abortion bans, and 41 states have abortion bans in effect with only limited exceptions. According to the Human Rights Campaign's 2023 year-to-date snapshot, over 520 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were introduced in state legislatures, which was a record. Over 220 bills specifically targeted transgender and non-binary people, which was also a record. Is it good news that only 70 of those were enacted? Other bills address policing classroom censorship, whether it be regarding sexuality or accurate history regarding race. And unbelievably, even the issue of divorce is now on the table. So let that sink in for a second. So please familiarize yourself with your state's governing bodies, find out when state legislative sessions are, and be aware of the bills being introduced into the process. I will tell you that tons of nonprofits spend a lot of time creating resources to simplify and inform you about what is going on in state legislatures. What I like to do is I really like to recommend like people take a moment to find 2 or 3 advocacy nonprofit organizations that they respect and resonate with. And basically just not to be like that person to tell you to do this, like I'm sure a million people do, but basically to like subscribe to their email communications or become members. And that really goes for both federal and state legislation. So for example, for AHA, I track federal legislation and create action alerts that make it easy for you to be aware of notable legislation, and then basically easy for you to contact your representatives and senators about it. So just like sending it off. And I'm sure that many, if not all of you, are familiar with American Atheists, the national advocacy nonprofit. They have and maintain an absolutely stellar state legislation map that tracks legislation related to the separation of religion and government and civil liberties. And I know that there are lots of advocacy orgs in Arizona that keep an eye on the state legislatures too, secular AZ included. I saw that you guys actually have action alerts too, which is amazing. So while we won't dive into it too much today, I did want to touch on the fact that state legislatures are, of course, not the only form of governing bodies within the state. There's county level boards and positions like county treasurer or county attorney. There are mayors and city councils. There are school boards that govern public education matters, and so on and so on. So certainly not trying to overwhelm you, but it's just important to be aware of these elected officials because they're really out here making decisions on your behalf. I really wanted to touch on this too, because the venom of white Christian nationalism is already so deeply seeped into our government. And the reality is that it's only going to get worse if we do not act to stop it in its various forms. I'm going to give you some homework for real. I highly encourage you to read about the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. Project 2025 is basically a mandate for leadership that prepares a federal executive administration for the systematic and methodical injection of Christian nationalist takeover. If you perhaps think that I'm exaggerating or being sensationalist with the language that I just used, I promise you that I'm not. So to see for yourself, go to project2025.org. The last thing we should talk about here is when you cast a vote for an office, for example, the office of the US president, the office of your state representative, please remember that your vote for that one person extends far beyond that one person. For example, when you vote for the president of the United States, you're voting for the widespread extension of their policy ideas. You vote for the leaders they choose for their cabinet, who are going to direct how the law is interpreted and executed in their respective federal agencies. You vote for their Supreme Court justice picks, which impacts generations. And even, when you vote for your state representative, you're also voting for the people they'll appoint for various state commissions, for example, or who your state senators vote to appoint as Senate president, who then has the power to appoint committee chairs, who also wield tremendous power. It goes on and on. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. All right, so since I've lived in DC now for 3 years, I've definitely not been as up to date on Arizona's local policy as I used to be. And in fact, this is surely, like we've discussed, like this is a very well-informed crowd, of course. Most likely you yourselves are more knowledgeable on what is going on in your state than I am, but I did want to take some time to highlight some of the local issues uniquely facing Arizonans that are also a part of national trends. So Arizona, as everybody knows, is unfortunately and tragically a state that has restricted abortion and contains those who wish to further restrict this essential healthcare. And with the way the laws were set up on the books from all the way back in the 1800s, Arizonans have been jerked left and right as it pertained to the legality of abortion. So I was even confused, and I had to go directly to AG May's website. And basically my understanding is that abortion is currently legal until 15 weeks of pregnancy. After 15 weeks, a doctor can perform an abortion only if they determine that it's a medical emergency. So even with that, Arizonans must jump through hoops basically to satisfy requirements to even obtain their abortion, such as satisfying like in-person notice requirements, having a forced ultrasound. So while abortion may be accessible, it's definitely severely restricted and made unnecessarily difficult. We really need to take to heart that just because abortion is accessible now in the state does not mean that it is safe from harm and further restriction or banning in the future. And really the same goes for contraception. On another note, Arizona's legislature has been quite hostile to the LGBTQIA+ community. The subjects of such laws have included banning the use of preferred pronouns, allowing the litigation of schools for providing queer spaces, banning girls from playing sports, banning trans and non-binary folks from using school restrooms that match their gender identity, going after drag shows, banning gender affirming surgery for trans minors, and just like literally just so much more. And of course, we cannot talk about Arizona without talking about vouchers and charter schools. Essentially, this is, as you know, where public taxpayer funds are going to private religious schools. And I think Arizona was actually one of the first, if not the first, in the nation to enact an education savings account program, basically is what they're called, commonly referred to as an ESA. These vouchers allow public funds to be used and flow directly towards private religious schools, and they act as kind of like a subsidy. According to like this like CNN voucher study that was literally released like just 2 days ago, their investigation found that the program has cost hundreds of millions of dollars more than anticipated, disproportionately benefited richer areas, and funneled taxpayer funds to unregulated private schools that don't face the same educational standards and anti-discrimination protections that public schools do. So of course, Arizona faces a lot more big button issues than these, but those are just some of the big ones that I remember off the top of my head. Other reasons to vote. So these issues are not just confined to the legislative spaces. Arizonans also vote directly on law during elections in the form of ballot measures, typically initiatives and referendums. So just for awareness, an initiative is the method by which voters may propose new laws or amend existing laws by gathering signatures from registered voters to place the issue on the ballot. And a referendum is the method by which voters can veto a law or part of a law by gathering signatures from registered voters to place the issue on the ballot. I am not personally privy to what these include for this particular upcoming election. I noted that in the past we got, I think it was, I don't remember the acronym, but AMA, but it's the one that introduced marijuana. I don't exactly recall, but basically like there have been issues in the past that get through the ballot initiatives. So I'm not privy to the ones that are here for this upcoming election. If someone else has expertise on that, however,
if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that I think in September, or October, since we're on the topic, we will be having, I believe it's the League of Women Voters, to talk about the various ballot initiatives. We're going to do a whole thing, a series of events where we talk about the judicial appointment, like who you should retain for the judicial nominations and stuff like that. So yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows that as we get closer to the election, we're going to have more like programming that supports y'all to be able to make your decisions, because this ballot, I went to a civic engagement beyond voting thing on Sunday, and they said in Maricopa and Pima counties, which are the largest counties in Arizona, we might have 3 pages of a ballot, and that poses all kinds of problems, which we've discussed in the past. So I'm sorry, Isabella, I just wanted to put that out there because it was timely.
Oh, absolutely. Like that. When is that going to be, you said? I actually might be interested in attending myself because that's
Yeah, I'm sure that Lindsay can put up the secular calendar, but I know that we're going to have like League of Women Voters. There's this wonderful retired attorney named Vic Aronow who talks about judicial retentions and who we should retain and who we should not, and the reasons why. And then a few other things. We'll try to do our best to prepare folks to make their decisions as they vote. So yeah.
awesome. And I think that one of those that you will probably talk about is, if I'm not mistaken again, like I think that one of them is there's going to be a vote directly on whether they're trying to throw off the ability for voters to directly vote on whether or not to retain Supreme Court justices. That's definitely an important whether that's correct or not. I think it's definitely an important thing to know too, that as an Arizona voter, you have the ability to vote on whether to retain Supreme Court justices, which is huge.
And I will say,
Yeah.
real quick, because I don't know if you know about this, Isabella, but they did pass a resolution through the House and the Senate that's going to put it on the ballot to retain judges for life, and it would be retroactive. So even if the voters choose not to retain the justices that don't deserve to be there, it would go retroactively to before the election. Like this is the game that's being played with Arizonans right now. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, not surprising at all. Like I mean, that's a game is a good way to say it. Like the fact that it just like flies in the face of like democratic, like, like it's just insane. Um, but yeah, so you can understand like why your vote matters. Every single vote matters, no matter what. And I know that all my friends in Maricopa County understand this, wink, wink. Democracy, reproductive rights, secular governance, racial equity, the environment, the queer community, so much more. All of these are on the ballot and they're all at stake. I think that ultimately the point is that with your simple participation in doing your civic duty, dangerous legislation like everything that we've just talked about, it can all be defeated at its source. Um, Next slide, please. Just because, so I just wanted to briefly address like the actual logistics of voting in Arizona, just like very briefly. But basically, in order to vote in Arizona, you have to be a U.S. citizen, an Arizona resident, and at least 18 years old. I think there's like a stipulation or two about if you've had a felony, you'll have to have had your like civil rights restored or something. And then how to register. To register online, you're going to want to visit servicearizona.com. And that's all obviously all one word, but servicearizona.com. You're going to sign up, verify voter eligibility, enter required information, and verify your address, and then select a party preference. That site, as well as the Secretary of State site, offers a step-by-step guide if you need help. But of course, like online also isn't the only option. You can also register by mail or in person. Please do be aware that if you've legally changed your name, moved to a new address, or if you want to change your party affiliation, be aware that you're going to want to update your voter information, just to make sure that you're ready to receive your ballot in time for the election. And then how to vote. In Arizona, you're able to vote in person and by mail. And actually, both of these choices have vote early options. I remember when I lived in Arizona and being like, wow, this is like great. Because I will tell you, like, some of the states don't have this. So basically, just check out the Secretary of State's website and or your county recorder site for more details. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about lobbying, not to platform Rob Schneider, but I just thought that that was a very good GIF for this. Yeah, I say GIF. I don't know. Don't come after me, but so what is lobbying? I would be seriously remiss, actually, if we didn't talk about lobbying at least a little bit with you today. Lobbying, in the simplest terms, is the act of attempting to influence government decisions. That's it. Lobbying itself is a component of advocacy. So while advocacy can refer to the broad stroke of showing support or educating around a certain issue or cause, for example, by like attending a protest or building a coalition of like-minded organizations, lobbying gets more specific and refers to the action of taking a stance on legislation and engaging with public officials. So why is lobbying important? When you lobby, you are communicating directly with decision makers that have the power to create, execute, and interpret the law. Therefore, lobbying is an integral tool utilized by advocates within our democracy to realize like real tangible change. So when you participate in lobbying, you're showing up for your community and its values. For example, like if you're a humanist, lobbying really raises the profile of the humanist community and agenda. And because not only are you simply identifying yourself as a community, like identifying yourself as a community, but you're identifying yourself as a community having agency, unique perspective, and most importantly, you are showing that you have concern. So meeting or communicating with your elected officials can be one of the most effective ways of securing their commitment to protect the issues that are important to you. And really, I know that every single one of us is so far past well aware that civil liberties and human rights are not a given. They are fought for. A lot of the times when folks hear the words lobbying or lobbyists, there's sort of an affiliated negative connotation that comes to people's minds. Or perhaps you wonder why, like, you as an average Joe could speak with any authority on an issue. Let me tell you, as a person that's subject to the laws that we make for ourselves, you have the authority to make your voice heard on the things that you care about. And you do not have to be an expert to speak to elected officials. Do not let a fear of public speaking or a fear of making your opinions public stop you from standing up for what you believe in. It is a fact that those who wish to desecrate civil liberties and human rights, the environment, ethics, they are not going to be too shy to lobby, and you shouldn't be either. So with practice and equipped with some of the following tips, I assure you that you're going to find a confidence. I have done a little bit of lobbying myself, and I never thought that I would be able to do that in my life. Like, even speaking to you right now, like, it's definitely, you know, the more that you do it and the more like you're around these issues and are aware of things, like the more confident you will feel. And we could really do an entire presentation on lobbying and the legislative process, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're just going to be brief. So in the Arizona legislature, the public has allotted time to comment on pending legislation during committee hearings, directly in front of an audience and actually the members themselves. So first things first, when lobbying, you need to identify what your issue and what your ask is. If you are indeed lobbying on a piece of legislation during that allotted time in committee, you're going to want to decide who's going to accompany you, if anybody, and you're going to want to decide what you're going to bring. So for example, like maybe you want to bring a little one pager to bring along with you as a leave behind that kind of summarizes why you support or oppose the legislation. Just be aware that the committee chair, I think, has to approve the distribution of that. So just be aware of that. And then ensure that you plan and structure your remarks efficiently and persuasively. I think that if I'm remembering correctly, like sometimes you only had 2 minutes if it was like a really controversial bill and they had a bunch of people to get in. So just know that you're not going to have like 10 minutes to basically explain. You're not going to have a lot of time basically. So I guess like within those remarks, consider if you have any personal stories to tell that are related to the issue. If you are a constituent of a member on that committee, make that clear too, because they definitely pay attention to constituents a lot more than if you are not a constituent. Not that they won't listen to you, but you're definitely more valuable to them. So do research to the best of your ability and make sure you're informed. During your remarks, you're going to want to stay on topic and basically go ahead and answer any questions to the best of your ability, but never lie or guess at an answer. The best answer that you can ever give is, I don't know, but I'd be happy to get back to you. This supports your reliability as a resource. So as some last notes, really, like lobbying is done at the local, state, and federal levels, and in one-on-one meetings with members. So please like apply these tips liberally. Also, virtual meetings are absolutely an option these days if you are considering meeting one-on-one with your members. So definitely take advantage of that if it's easier for you. So the RTS and BSI, it's funny because I was going to take some time to talk about how to get on to the request to speak system at the Arizona Capitol and like kind of like walk us through it. But I realized I don't have to, because the Secular Arizona's website has a comprehensive step-by-step guide on how to sign up to lobby at the state capitol. So like y'all are really spoiled, like for real. Like please take some time to check out this resource as it can absolutely explain how you can actually sign up to speak at the Capitol. And then just like as an FYI, like if you are curious about like what bills are going through the legislature, like when they're going to be heard and stuff, the Arizona Capitol uses a system called BSI, or Bill Status Inquiry. for everything legislation, committees, and floor. So this is where you're gonna find information on bill texts, sponsors, bill summaries, votes, when a bill lands on a calendar, and also like who supports or opposes the legislation. So next slide, please. Okay, so armchair activism. Maybe you're shy and not ready to engage elected officials yet in person. Maybe your schedule just doesn't permit the time to do so as much as you'd like. I am pleased to tell you that there are solutions. You can lobby from the comfort of your own home, which can absolutely be the easiest way to advocate for pieces of legislation or policies that matter to you. So, like I mentioned briefly, like previously, many advocacy organizations have a software that allows them to send what are called action alerts out to supporters. For example, at AHA, we call ours the Humanist Action Headquarters, or HAHQ. Action alerts are basically calls to action. They're like these pre-written messages to elected officials that make it easy for you to just put your name on and send it to them directly. So in our action alert system at the AHA, we definitely make sure to put the links to our alerts, and they include like all the information that you need to know about the bill, that you're going to be sending a message to your reps about, including the background information, the content of the bill, and why it's important. And like I mentioned before, Secular AZ also has an action alert system, I believe. So another way to advocate for a piece of legislation is really just to simply pick up the phone and call a member's office. You can absolutely find their contact information like online, especially for state level legislative members. Emails will most likely be listed online on the legislature's website. However, I will let you know that if you are considering connecting with your congressional representatives, their contact information is not going to be listed as so. So what you'll want to do is call the office. Like you'll go to like this member's website, go to the bottom, and it'll say like the number for their office. Go ahead and call that and ask to be connected with the appropriate staffer. And finally, if you want to go the old school route, then just find a piece of paper, write out your grievances, and drop it in the mail. Just make sure that you're writing the address correctly on the envelope. And then, as I mentioned before, if you're looking for guidance and a helping hand to get you started and plugged in, really just connect with state and national nonprofits, just as you have with Secular Arizona today. Like they are so happy to have you and answer any questions that you may have, because ultimately, like we're all doing this together to better the world for one another. So next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, folks, that's all I have for you today. I hope that we've bestowed a confidence and excitement in you to go forth and advocate for the issues where you want to see improvements or reform, and inspired you to vote and register to vote and tell your friends. I really appreciate and thank everybody for joining. On the slide, you can find my contact information. So please feel free to reach out to me in the AHA policy department for any lobbying or just general policy questions you may have. I'm definitely happy to try to my best at answering questions. But if I don't know the answer, I'd be happy to connect with you offline, like I mentioned before. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and stop yeah, there we go. Okay. Because there's a question. Well, I'll get to the first one that I see first. This one comes from Jay. He says, what are the trends in active membership and donations with the AHA? Great question.
So I personally do not know because I'm not in the development department. But I would be happy to I'm going to drop my email in the chat just so that everybody has it. But if you want to send that question to me, I can definitely put you in contact with our staffer Meredith, or I can send you our what is it called? Like the organizational report, the financial report.
Okay, thank you for dropping that. There was another question that I saw a little bit further up. Let me see. Oh, okay. This is a good question because we all get suckered into these things. on the regular, right? How truly effective are these like online petitions, right? From like whatever organizations that sent to lobbyists and legislators who, oh wait, okay, sent to legislators versus paid lobbyists who offer campaign contributions. So like okay, so if we went to a moveon.org petition, does that actually do anything? I feel like that's the question.
Definitely. I mean, that is yeah, I would have asked the same question myself as well. Um, I will tell you this, that when I was interning at in Congress for a member, we received every single email that was sent and I didn't realize until I started working at a nonprofit that these were actually action alerts. And I was always wondering, like, why is the language like the same? Like, I don't understand how this is happening. Um, but the offices literally receive every single message that they have, and they actually make a tally um, on what the, at least this was my experience with the office. So they actually do keep track of like who is telling them and how to support what. So obviously, like, constituents have a lot of power. Like, they like, I know it may not seem like it, like, but like members really do value the opinions of their constituents because you are their boss, and you elect them. So I will say that. I would say that the difference between like a constituent and like, I can't speak to like a corporate lobbyist, but at least for like nonprofit lobbyists, it's like you're really like fostering a relationship with them, and building trust. And really, like, as the nonprofit, you represent, for example, like AHA represents like members, right? So we're really just bringing forth like the needs of a population. So um I think that at least for nonprofit government affairs staff, like, that's kind of what that looks like. I
Okay.
hope I answered that okay.
No, it's good to know. Erica did chime in and say that most online petitions are actually contact farming. I mean, there's definitely an aspect of that. I mean, I've known people personally here in Arizona who have like put together these angry petitions about some injustice, and when you look a little bit closer, you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there. You're just trying to get people's email addresses. Um, Mars does say that they are sad that the AHA conference is virtual only this year. Wah, wah.
Yeah, we are virtual. I think every other year we're virtual and then in person. And if this is the same Mars that I met last year at the American Atheist Conference, hi.
I mean, I only know one Mars and they are amazing.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can't imagine. And I hope there's not another Mars, to be quite honest. So let's see. I had a question. Let me see if I can remember it because I am 51 years old and sometimes remembering things is hard. Um, since you are in DC though, what's the general vibe there? Do you feel do you feel like there's a willingness to even allow yourself to listen to voices of people that don't share your worldview? Because I know that here in Arizona, some of these folks will not even take a meeting with me. And in fact, like they'll refer to me or our organization as a bunch of like devil worshiping, like whatever, you know? So do you find that it's easy to actually connect with people who don't agree with you?
That's a really good question. I think it has, like, the answer to it has many levels, but I think, like, I mean, and I think I have to speak like personally about this and like not on behalf of AHA or anything, but like in my own experience, like, I have had like a lot of conversations with people that do not share the same uh view as me. And our people are very open-minded. I think, like, just generally, and I say this because I think I didn't understand this until I actually moved here, but almost everybody who lives in DC is their career is somehow linked to government affairs. Like, so everybody that you
Yeah.
meet is like, look, like, kind of like hovering around the Capitol and is like tangentially related. So you're gonna meet people who are on the, like, just like on different sides of an issue than you. So, but they are really respectful. People are very respectful. I think that in terms of like elected officials, um, all else, like I don't know if I can speak to, in the mind of certain officials, but they're definitely open to what you have to say. I think that, politics can get in the way of things, and they need to make a point and basically stand out to their constituents, no matter who that is. However, I think that there is a lot more working behind, like working together than we see. Um, I would say that, I guess.
I mean, I feel like I've heard that from people, at least in the state legislature here, like the conversations that they will have with you as a human, as a fellow human, just individual, are much different than how they speak to you on the floor. And there's also now, because of how divided we are, like, even though you may fully agree with somebody about something, and we did see this, right? We saw this with the 1864 repeal. Like, there were, the Arizona Agenda covered it, that there were a few Republicans who said, I absolutely think that this 1864 ban is ridiculous, but I cannot publicly cross my party leadership. That's a death sentence. Like, so there's no meaningful, I mean, and I've told this story before. There was a time, because you mentioned Tori Roberg, who's absolutely amazing. She, had the secular studies program, which I hope to be able to implement again. That, it was about death and die, like death and dignity and death, right? Like, and there was a bill that was put forward about allowing Arizonans to make their end of life decisions without, retribution. And there was a Republican there who was like, oh my gosh, yes, I watched my mother-in-law suffer terribly from cancer. But Jesus also suffered. So that I can't fully support this, even though watching her suffer was truly horrible. Like, I don't, like, there's such a disconnect, whether it's the party, whether it's, your Christian nationalist beliefs, it almost feels hopeless sometimes, right? Like, that you might not be able to make change. And this kind of goes along with the next question coming from Mark. Mark says, how do we get the word out about white Christian nationalists and the Seven Mountain Mandate?
um, well, I mean, how we get the word out about it is by lobbying, like by connecting with your legislators, legislators, literally bring it up to them, like be like, send them an email, be like, here's all the resources that you need to know about this. Like, this is a very serious thing. Do not knock the power of literally just conversing with your friends. Like, I I live right next to my best friend. But he works in like housing stuff. So he's not really like in the social policy
Social
world.
justice. Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, I mean, I've worked with the AHA for 2 years, and the term Christian nationalism or white Christian nationalism is like, it's like everyday language. Like, it's like nothing. But I ended up like talking to them about like, oh, like, like this, like, and then I said white Christian nationalism, and they kind of like laughed, and I was like, what's so funny? Like, I truly didn't understand like what was funny, and they were just like, that word just sounds like it's not that they don't agree with me or anything like that. It's just like it's literally just, it sounds perhaps like a sensationalist word,
Yep.
because people aren't familiar with that term, but now they are. So literally having these conversations and literally telling people like, this is white Christian nationalism, this is what it is, even like directing them to resources. I can't tell you like how much stuff like starts at the grassroots level and just kind of like goes up. So I would
And
say just talk to people, really.
I'm really grateful, actually. I think it was just this past Sunday. John Oliver had a piece about Project 2025.
Oh,
And
wow.
as Mars says in the chat, they are hearing about Project 2025 all over the place, so much more than when they first heard of it. So I do hope I almost said hope and pray. I hope and believe that there will be, an awareness about this, and people, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and she said, because we used to teach in the same high school, and she said that a friend of hers who is in the social studies department is going to vote for Jill Stein. The last time she talked to her, that's what she said. And while I really couldn't care less about national politics, this time is probably the most important, time, because I think even Hillary Clinton came out and said, this might be our last vote in a democratic society. Like she said, this is our vote for democracy or fascism. Like that's what we're coming towards. So while I appreciate my friend's, desire to take a stand against Biden, say for his, support of Israel or whatever, because that's what this stems from, right? I certainly hope that people understand that even though it's not going to be perfect under Biden, it's going to be way less perfect for our most marginalized and most vulnerable communities, all right, it's 12:52. I want to honor everybody's time today. And so, Isabella, I try to end because sometimes these are depressing. I do think that this conversation was a little bit more hopeful. It was more informative and good informative instead of like bad informative. So, but it's still a really weird timeline that we live in, right? I'm super concerned today about the crazy wind we have. We're probably looking at our first monsoon this season that will probably be a dry monsoon. And I'm super concerned about wildfires and things like that. Things are scary right now. And we've got this orange guy running for office. So in the face of all that adversity, what gives you hope?
I love that. And why is it funny that I did not expect that question? What gives me hope is, I think like what really gives me hope is just seeing like organizations like yours at the local level, like doing this work and like putting these resources together and really like gathering these communities to really understand like this how serious like these threats are. Because like you said, I've also seen the slogan that's like, vote, it may be your last time, like last chance to do so. And it's like, oh my, like that's serious, like it's scary. And I think just like really seeing that people are passionate, and I think like, seeing like I have seen, even though like we are so what do you call it, like this sounds like so typical to say, but like even though we are so polarized, connect, I think like when I connect with people who are like on the other side, and it's like, okay, like we do agree on all these things, it's just like this little part that like maybe we're not making sense. It does give me hope. And I think also like I said, like I mean, as you all know, from my presentation, like I really do come from like a local, I really enjoy and miss local policy and like local government. So I think like whenever I see like something happen at the local level, it's really saying like, like people are engaged, people are really engaged, like they know what's going on and like they know what they want. I think like in Arizona, there's something that's been voted down like multiple times. And I can't recall what it is, but it's something that's been voted down multiple times. And I think the legislature like passed it anyway or something. I don't remember what that is, but I think it's just, okay, vouchers. Yeah. So yeah, I guess just like connecting with other people gives me like a lot of hope. So, and seeing the humanity in people.
Yeah, no, and that's it. I mean, like when people ask me to define my secular self, right? Like, or that's not even the right term, but like what is my belief system? I always say like I'm an atheist humanist. I don't really believe in God, but I definitely believe in people. And here's my hope that I can share with everybody too, is that I've actually been able to take meetings now with some, much more far right leaning people than me in elected office. Whereas 2 years ago, I couldn't do that at all. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting down and having a conversation at a table with somebody who I never thought that I would have a conversation with. So there is, I hope, a bit of rage fatigue And unfortunately, because I tell you what, I am fatigued by their rage. So I encourage all of you to continue showing up. School board meetings, I know that there's going to be a lot of pushback right now with this 10 Commandments thing happening in Louisiana. I just about guarantee that people are going to start showing up to their school board meetings and demanding that people post those. So we need you to continue to show up. I just about guarantee that they're going to be talking about Biden's changes to Title IX. So I encourage you to keep showing up to school board meetings. Because yeah, they are loud, but we are many. So that's how I try to think of everything. They're loud, but there are more of us. Our numbers prove it, and the trajectory shows it. So thank you so much, Isabella, for coming with us, for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, are you avoiding the heat wave that's happening all over the country?
I actually miss the sun. So I miss Arizona. You know, I'm about to go outside in the sun.
Okay, well, enjoy, and thank you all so much. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And if you're so moved, come to Rim Country Pride and hang out on Sunday and join the Secular AZ table. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.
See y'all later. Take care.